Okay, hello everyone. It is July 17th, 2025. Sorry, I know I haven't done a lot of videos lately, but I've been working a lot. So, welcome to the new subscribers, and hope if you like the video that you will like and subscribe, please. So, either way, on to the topic. One of the most persistent commentaries you hear in American politics is that American education would be so much better if only we would properly fund it. If we just spent the money on it, things would be much, much better. Uh, well, let's take a look at what the data says. That is a firmly held belief. It is a belief held by many people to a religious degree. But let's see what some data says on it. One, are states increasing education spending? And the answer is yes, they are. In fact, quite a bit. The second thing is, okay, so what's happening with the test scores? So I want to do I'm going over some data from the National Center for Education Statistics. What this is it shows the increase in per pupil spending, inflation adjusted. I want to say that again. This is inflation adjusted between the year 2000 and 2020. Vermont led the nation. They increased per pupil spending in that 20-year period, again, inflation adjusted, by 100%. And for that, on their NAEP math, reading, and science exam scores between 2003 and 2019, they saw a minus 1.4% growth. In other words, their scores they doubled school spending per student, inflation adjusted, and their test scores got a little bit worse. New Hampshire is in second place for increasing funding. They increased by 74%, and their test scores got better by 0.3%. Not 3%, 0.3%. North Dakota comes in at third place, having increased their funding by 70%, and their test scores have declined by 0.6%. Let's see here. After that, we have New York, who increased their spending by 67.5%, and their test scores declined by 0.4%. Let's go down to the bottom of the chart and let's see what happened to some of the states that had the smallest increases in spending. So, three of the four states, the largest increase in spending, saw admittedly nominal declines in test scores. By the way, NAEP is the standard by which all the states are compared against each other in terms of learning. Idaho had the lowest increase in that 20-year period. They only increased per pupil spending, inflation adjusted, by 4.5%. Their test scores went up by, again, a nominal amount, 1.2%. So Vermont doubles spending and gets slightly worse test scores. Idaho somewhat increases spending, not much, and they get slightly better test scores. What about a big, diverse, multi-ethnic state like Florida? Well, Florida increased per student spending by about 12.5%, making us around 46th in the nation in terms of increasing education spending during this time period. So near the bottom. Florida saw a 3.8% increase in test scores. So again, a state like New York, which is another big multi-ethnic, very diverse state, they increased their spending by 67.5%, and their test scores drop by 0.4%. Florida increases by only 12.5%, sees a 3.8% increase. What about Texas? Another very big, very diverse state. Texas increased their spending by slightly more than Florida, 12.9%, and their increase in test scores was 1.8%, so roughly half of what the increase Florida saw. Now, ultimately, if you notice, these test score increase and decreases are all pretty small numbers. They're all, a fraction of a percent, or maybe, 1, 2, 3, 4%. Really no major shifts here, although massive shifts in funding. California, the biggest state of them all, increased per student spending by 51.6%. And when you think about the number of students California has, which is probably the biggest of any, well, it is the biggest of any state in the country, it's a huge amount of money they've invested. They saw a 3.7% increase in scores. So a massive increase in spending. They got a nominal increase in test scores, very slightly less than what Florida got. And Florida only increased by, about 1/4 the same amount. And if you go, and I can keep going through a bunch more of these. Let's see here. Another example, Kansas increased their funding by 32%, and their test scores dropped by 1.3%. New Mexico increased their funding by 29.5%. Their test scores went up 1%. Essentially, what I take from this is that there's no correlation. You see states with huge increases and getting slightly worse scores, states with huge increases getting slightly better scores, states with tiny increases getting slightly better scores, states with relatively smaller increases getting slightly worse scores, like Delaware increased theirs by 19.2%. Their test scores dropped by 0.4%. So basically, there's a little bit of everything. The main two takeaways is, one, there appears to be no correlation here. It doesn't seem to really matter. How much you increase your spending, it's really not going to affect your student performance a whole lot. The second takeaway I just completely lost because my light went out, so I'm sorry about that. But either way, main one is that correlation doesn't do. Oh, I'm sorry. Second takeaway is that yes, states have been increasing their education funding. The education budgets, not in terms of total budget, but in terms of per pupil, although total budget would be bigger as well, per pupil have been getting higher and higher. The lowest state is Idaho, which went up 4.5%. Again, that's adjusting for inflation. And when you look at, a lot of states are over 50%, and most of them are over 25%. So again, fairly large to huge increases in funding have been going on over that 20-year period. Okay, so that was the first one. Second one, well, this should be begging a question. Well, hold on. If there's all this increase in funding going on, and test scores are either getting nominally better or nominally worse, and basically not really changing, where the hell's all the money going? What's happening to it all? Well, according to the Digest of Education Statistics, from 2000 to 2019, the number of students enrolled in schools increased by 8%. So we have an 8% increase in student population. Okay, that's modest, no big deal there. Well, what happened to the increase in teachers? The answer is it pretty much mirrored the increase in students. There's about 8% more teachers from 2000 to 2019. So students up 8%, teachers up 8%. Okay, makes sense. But the funding's up a hell of a lot more than 8% overall. So what's going on? Well, principals and assistant principals, we have 37% more of them than we did in 2000. What about administrative staff? 88% increase from 2000 to 2019. So if you want to know what happened to all the, this state had 100%, this state had 70%, this state had 60%, increases in funding. Where did all that money go? The answer is administration. The number of teachers basically kept up with the number of students. We dramatically increased the number of principals and assistant principals and monumentally increased the number of administrators. So if you're wondering what happens with increased education funding, the answer is we hire administrators. It doesn't really have any impact on test scores, doesn't really have any impact on student performance. It does, however, create a lot of new jobs for administration. It does not particularly create many new teaching jobs. It creates some, not many. Creates a lot of new jobs for assistant principals and principals, and creates tons and tons and tons of new administrative jobs. So basically, all the billions and billions and billions of extra dollars we have been throwing at education with the idea that this will, everyone says to improve student outcomes. It is in fact a jobs program for administration. That is really where the money is going. That's where the growth is overwhelmingly. I guess you could argue that in the year 2000, our schools were just terribly, unbelievably understaffed at the administrative side, but we definitely had all the teachers we need. And so, we just had to increase all the administrators. And if you want to make that argument in the comments, feel free. But yeah, as always, please feel free to disagree. Feel free to fact check me, see what you come up with. And I hope everybody has enjoyed this video. All right, bye-bye.